The family of the late President Mwai Kibaki, Your Excellencies, party leaders, you have all been recognized. The only ones who have not been recognized individually are our flavor of the month, Justin Muturi, my whip when I was a minister under Kibaki, Norman Nyaga. Ladies and gentlemen, for purposes of turning this into a conversation involving all of you, I will keep within the time limit, but also say things that others have not said. Quite a bit of what I wanted to say has been said, particularly by Professor Kagwanja, aligning national, international, and domestic policy with identified national priorities. But if you may allow me, I want to reminisce, not in a way of remembering what Kibaki did, but in raising our collective challenge of the moment in the light of how Kibaki dealt with it. And for this, I think I start with a sound reading of the situation. I start with the earliest time I had intense interaction with the late president was around the year 2000, when we were trying to build a coalition of the opposition. And what he was exuding of as a leader was being so comfortable in your own standing that you don't try too hard to impose yourself as the leader. That through the period when we were bonding, it was very difficult. There were real spoilers, and Norman, you were present. You could hear Mwai Kibaki, Martin Shikuku go off about you Kikuyus and what you have done to us. And Matu Amai reply with how much we have the money and we have the people, will just remember and sympathize with you. But Kibaki had to rein in all these extremes and accommodate without overemphasizing his role as a leader. But to me, this also indicated an underlying strength that Kibaki had, and it ran through his leadership. He was clever enough to know that he was not adequate in everything. I never know clever people think they know everything. When you find such people, they're not clever. Yeah. And being adequately clever meant that he tried to identify talent that he could nurture, but he could also assign responsibilities to persons that he thought could perform. But to me, the most important evidence of his sense of clever enough to feel inadequate was the importance he placed on the creation of a National Economic and Social Council. I think one of the most important features that really set up the beacons for the Kibaki presidency was to say, if you are sailing without a rudder, you can end up where you came from instead of the right destination. And you cannot overstate the importance of the National Economic and Social Council and one of its products, Vision 2030, in aligning immediate political priorities with long-term identified national agenda that is depersonalized, that is not a Kibaki agenda, but an agenda for Kenya. Secondly, the humility of Kibaki surprised many of us when we were building the early phase of the government. Like many of you can remember, within the very first cabinet meeting I think we had, President Kibaki introduced to cabinet a proposal that we donate Cabernet Gardens to Daniel Arap Moi. At that time, some ministers were telling Kano people, you sit back, you didn't know how to rule, we show you how to rule, you are thieves. But here's a president who has been humiliated by Moi for years, saying, let us get out of the way a sense that you can be vindictive. Let us be larger than the conduct and behavior of those from whom we are taking power. Can we have the strength to say, we retire you with respect and donate to you a public asset you did not steal for all the years you're president? I want to finish off with the bit about humility, because recently I listened to something and I said, can you imagine President Mwai Kibaki saying, don't you know I am the president? You know, when you are not adequate in yourself that you are holding an office, you look for external assurances that you are actually the boss that you're holding that office. But Kibaki was too big for that kind of pettiness. And every time I hear anybody say, don't you know I am what? I miss Mwai Kibaki. Now, when Kibaki appointed me minister, there are 3 areas that were immediately challenging and important to us. We, the Right Honorable Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, we were members of Council of East African Community and were in the final phase of negotiating a customs union for East Africa, which we did around Christmas 2005. The challenges we had were the contrasting national interests of Tanzania and Kenya, and Tanzania and Uganda, and Kenya and Uganda. For example, Tanzanians consume much more wheat in chapati than anybody else in East Africa in per capita terms. And therefore, as a country without production of any significant quantities of wheat, Tanzania will always want the cheapest, the lowest duty on wheat because of the chapati interest. Now, Kenya has some wheat farmers, like Kipia and a few other places, not sufficient for our national interest, but requiring some protection from cheap wheat brought in under a low tariff on wheat products. And there we were, stuck in discussions with Tanzania. And we'll come back to Mwai Kibaki and he says, lazima tuonyeshe interest kwamba tunataka huu umoja wetu, it is important to us, but don't sacrifice Kenyan farmers for that umoja. Similarly, we had a challenge with Uganda. The state in Uganda was dominated by mercantilist capitalists, importers of low-cost merchandise from Eastern Asia and trying to quickly turn a profit. But Kenya had a manufacturing base for some of the things Ugandan merchants were importing. So while Kenya wanted to protect capital goods and protect finished products which can be made in Kenya from being liberalized, Uganda wanted as low a tariff as possible on imports of goods which would be sold around. But you know, as we walked this tight road of keeping friends, but also defining what is in the national interest, Kibaki was giving us 2 directions. We must belong together and only make concessions if we can now create domestic policy to become competitive and defeat the threat that comes with those concessions. If we're liberalizing wheat, what shall we do not to kill the wheat production in Kenya? If we want to be friends with Uganda, how can we not sacrifice the people who are making some significant products that are otherwise being imported cheaply by the traders who want to lower tariffs on those finished goods? I say this because aligning actual national production interest with treaty building was a feature of leadership that has disappeared in our politics. Today is like we put saliva on the finger and we check where the direction of the wind is. Today I want that to be my friend, whether it is Kosovo or it is the rapid deployment forces. You say, how does this align with the national interest? There was no such conversation. But there's also something that I want to say that has not been properly mentioned. Mwai Kibaki believed in cabinet government. The president had ideas of what he wanted done, but he was ready to modify or even suspend those ideas on the basis of discussion within the cabinet. I was impressed at how in some of the areas he knew better than most of us, but he had the humility as a leader to give every person a chance. And then when we're coming towards the end, he says, is there anybody who's opposing that position? For those of us who have not been in another cabinet, we're outraged when we hear about persons who use cabinet as a rubber stamp of personal decisions, because it never worked under Kibaki. And that way it gave us a strength to prosecute what the president was declaring in public, because we owned it as part of collective government. I had the privilege to be part of a delegation of Mwai Kibaki on a state visit to Thailand. And at the state dinner, I asked the Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra, who had been one of the most successful leaders in the Eastern Asian financial crisis at the turn of the century, what he had done for Thailand to recover from the financial crisis so rapidly compared to others. And when Shinawatra said, what we did is to believe that if a tree is wilting, you don't pour water to the leaves, you pour at the stem, that you start building from the bottom, the most effective bottom-up thinking. And it struck me so much, so similar to what Mwai Kibaki had done in Kenya. In the first few months of becoming president, he brought through cabinet an urgent resolution that will buy back KCC, the Kenya Creameries, which had been taken off by Mwai and his son and a few others. And we got it back, and it immediately had an impact on the resuscitation of the dairy industry in this country. So walking the talk, believing that you align your international engagements with domestic responsibilities, and when you identify inadequacies, you deal with them. And importantly, reducing government borrowing in the domestic money markets to make credit affordable by entrepreneurs were key drivers to turning around a country which had problems similar to what we have today, but leadership very different. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. KITUHI. Always grateful to hear from you. Honorable Gathonio Mochomba, MP for Githunguri, welcome. I would like to find out whether we could get that video clip from Professor Peter Anyang' Nyong'o. The import here, ladies and gentlemen, is to show you how a country in macroeconomic distress, in serious distress, makes a quick recovery with an impact on its ordinary citizens. And the people at the center of it was a gentleman we have here, the present governor of Kisumu, and a dear friend of mine, Professor Peter Anyang' Nyong'o. He did this video clip just for this purpose for us, because he was unable to be with us. But he's so devoted to the work he did with President Kibaki, turning the economy around, that he felt it was necessary to send us this message. Professor Nyong'o.
The governor of Kisumu, and I've been governor for Kisumu and now my secretary. Good morning. Mike, thank you for asking me to give a brief on what we did with the communication birth and employment creation in 2002. You know, the National Rainbow Coalition government has just come into power after a long period of fight for reforms, both for democracy as well as economic and social development in our country. So we decided to have a series of discourses with people before we could put anything in paper regarding our development program. So we called several meetings. One of them, which was very important, was the one we call at Leisure Lodge at the coast, with that cross-section of people, private sector, unions, development partners, government officials, investors. It's a very robust meeting where they said, okay, look, here we are, they're all Kenyans, they're all interested in the future of this country. We are in the government, we have a reform project, a reform program, the it is. We would like first to deal with poverty in this country, and secondly, to open a democratic space for our people. Doing the two things together sometimes is difficult, but I think with the working relationship among all of us, we can do it. We had a spirit, or we can do it. Nobody else is going to do it for us. Contributions were made, and people agreed on one thing, that we must have a project for creating wealth and fighting poverty. And that is why we call it economic recovery strategy for wealth and employment creation. It's only when people have where to work, in other words, employers, that they can have salaries. So wealth creation
Sorry? Well, I should add, okay, now the role that was played by the private sector and his own genius, he decreed the central bank lower the cash reserve ratio, the amount of cash for security in the banking system that the central bank, our banks were flush with cash. They didn't know what to do, so they came to you as citizens, something Kenyans have not seen for a long time, and gave the citizens the privilege and the power to change their own destiny. Good policy, good thinking. Because this is our second lecture series, I'd like to recognize the role Ambassador Muthaura played. He was the speaker last year, but unfortunately he had a tragedy at home, he couldn't be with us. And I want to recognize Ambassador Muthaura for the critical role he played in those days in coordinating the experts, the academics, and us. Actually, without him, very little could have done, because he is capable of working on 10 fronts at the same time, calmly and excitedly. And that helped our country. People may not recognize this, but we owe him as a country a lot. Thank you, Ambassador Muthaura, for what you did. We will have questions and answers from before we come to the final conclusion, from the audience. So please be precise. Just one question, if you like, please, directed to a particular speaker. We just got like 10 minutes or that, 15 minutes or that, and then we wind up so that we can prepare for the next session. Yeah. Professor Naitula, is he here? Is he here? We got a message, you wanted to ask a question, it's not here. Okay, fine.
We'll try to limit the question three for every panelist.
Yeah.
So we can go.
Yeah. If you just raise a question, raise your hand if you, and a comment. And if you say the government did well in the Kibaki years, that would be good too. Yes, and please tell us who you are, your institutional affiliation.
Thank you very much. My name is Saroni Jesse. I'm a student leader and part of a member of Democratic Party. And I think I joined Democratic Party because as a very young individual, because of the excitement that I saw among my elders of the promises that Kibaki was going to deliver. And when I got of age, I chose Democratic Party to join. I chose to join Democratic Party because of the belief that Kibaki had on the potential of our country. My question will go to Professor Kibwana, and it will be about the political challenges that we are facing as a country. If it were Kibaki, if Kibaki was the head of the country, what are some of the things that he would have done to be able to make every individual in Kenya to feel involved and to feel that to feel respected and to be able to calm the situation? Thank you very much.
Okay. You can have 2 or 3 and then I'll give the panel. So please note. Professor Kibwana. Yes, up here. You need a mic? Yeah, here. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Honorable Mercy Gakria, of Parliament, Kasarani constituency. My question is to Professor MUKHISA
KITUHI.
Doctor. What would it take Mwai Kibaki, if he was there, on how was he doing it to sack or to fire cabinet minister? What was the process or the procedure?
Okay, thank you, Mheshimiwa. Yeah, one more question on this side. Yeah. Yeah, the gentleman. Yeah. Yeah.
My name is James Morigo. I'd like to talk to Kibwana. At the time we were working on the constitution, it was said that Honorable Mwai Kibaki was for having us 14 counties. We ended up with 47. Now, these 47, we argued at that time that they are going to be an economic burden to this country. Where did we go wrong?
Thank you, Mr. Morigo. Just one more question at the back, and then I'll give the...
My name is MUKHISA. I'm a student leader at the University of Nairobi. I've not yet joined any political party, but I can see the right personnel here to propel me somewhere. My question is to Professor Kibwana. What do you think the systems then, when President Kibaki was in office, what do you think were the systems that he put in place that we cannot have in the current government system? Because in Kenyan as a history, you could hear a lot about what Kibaki did. Most of the things that are there, it's because of Kibaki. What do you think? And what leadership qualities set President Kibaki apart? And how can current leaders emulate those traits? And one last one to Professor MUKHISA. How did President Kibaki's economic strategies, such as Vision 2030 and free primary education, shape Kenya's long-term development trajectory? Thank you.
Okay. I'll give the panel a chance to respond. Dr. MUKHISA KITUHI, there are two questions addressed to you.
Yes,
please.
thank you. There were times when President Mwai Kibaki eased ministers out of office. The largest is after the vote on oranges and bananas. He basically disbanded cabinet and reconstituted it. But the other is when a minister was mentioned in a suspected scandal, he asked him to step aside pending investigation. And that he did to his closest friends, like the late Minister for Finance, David Mwerara. But he never ever asked Kibaki, will go after he has fired you to start saying you are stupid, you are incompetent, you are what in public. Secondly, if I may just take a take at counties, I was one of those people who ardently believed that at this stage of development, Kenya could not afford a new constitutional order which created 47 counties. You will suck all development resources into recurrent expenditure because of a bloated public bureaucracy. Unfortunately, it is extremely difficult democratically to get Kenya legislate to reduce the number of counties today. But this is a burden we have, which sometimes makes some people say, we wish there was an constitutional method of reorganizing things again. About what was shaped by Vision 2030, one of the most important contributions of Mwai Kibaki to Kenya's politics is the creation of free primary education, which has given us a generation of educated Gen Z who are rising above our generational responsibility. and doing a lot to give hope in a state of hopelessness. But also, Vision 2030 showed us he who has no destination cannot get lost. Those who lead without a destination where they're trying to take the country can go around in circles and think that popping up on top of levels at public rallies is purpose of leadership.
Thank you, Musa. Prof.
I appreciate the fact that two of the questions are from young people who are getting interested in the leadership of our country. And the first question was, given the current political problems that exist, suppose President Kibaki was the one to deal with them, how would that happen? The first way it would happen is most probably the problems would not be there. If they were, it would be, a small level of the problems. Because as I tried to say earlier, he was interested in actually getting this country to a good place. That was his, priority from when he began his political academic career and political career. But something that is very critical, which is not normally mentioned a lot, is in terms of youth affairs, like I was, through Osman Fazil, my docket of advising was extended to youth affairs. And he created the first youth ministry, and a very, very able permanent secretary for that ministry. And, the genesis of those youth funds, even the possibility of youth organization. Those were things that subsequently were not emphasized. And as a result, if we were even to go back to the legislation, the programs that President Kibaki initiated regarding the youth, the youth would be included, not excluded, not by bystanders. And I think even from the experience of, particularly towards 2010, making the Constitution, he more or less sent everybody who was in government to go and talk to the people about the benefits of this Constitution so that there's no confusion. And that was some of the most critical, in my view, public participation that was done to midwife the Constitution. And therefore, that idea of you need a conversation with the people so that they can ease whatever decisions must be taken. I think that was also foundational. So I think there are many lessons to be learned there. And the question about his leadership qualities, what would happen today if, again, similar, he was to, we were to use his thinking, to use his method to get us out of problems. We described, like in the initial stage, I described some of what we thought, and even MUKHISA, Professor Kagwancha, Professor Chege, what he put on the table, what he offered, what he wanted to mentor people to emulate, people to have space to learn how to be leaders, so that you didn't feel frightened that you could do wrong. Even if you say things that were not correct, there would be, he would talk to you privately, and that became a good thing. I think one of as I conclude, one of the issues that is a problem in our country is this idea of not building on what has been laid before. Because when you prioritize building on a foundation, like when we got the Constitution, when we got what President Kibaki did, the more you build on that through
President Uhuru Kenyatta currently, then you are successful. But if a time comes and maybe in recent times you decide that you want to start more or less afresh, and it's not clear how that afresh is, then the country does not benefit from firm foundations. And that is why I think when one looks at our country, although I will discuss with Professor Chege to tell us how we evaluate presidents, I think we can really say Kibaki stands shoulder of others, you know, and UK learned quite a bit from him, and Jomo Kenyatta, the earlier one, it was difficult to start, and then of course Mwai, and in that kind of, not ranking, in that kind of thinking, I cannot include the current president because he's still serving.
Thank you. Yeah. Briefly, Prof.
No, I'll be brief, and I'll go to the issue of the counties. I think it is important for Kenyans to know that the counties that have emerged are a compromise of decades of divisions amongst ourselves. Those who are familiar with the history of Kenya remember something called Majimbo. And Majimbo simply meant dividing the country into the provinces that were there, which we now call regions. And mostly the debate was very ethnic and very toxic. And largely this is what brought us to 2007. Therefore, as we were going to Naivasha as a technical team to support the parliamentary committee, President Kibaki called Professor Kibuga, myself, and a few others and said that we are going there for compromises, we're not going for fights. But something must be put on the line. That one, we cannot afford the 3 tiers of government, because that's what the proposals were about. We can only afford the 2 tiers, 2 levels of government. And if we have 2 levels of government, then we also need to have 2 chambers, or 2 chambers of parliament, the upper house and the lower house, whatever you call it. But he also said that whether we adopt these counties or whatever, we need one center of accountability. Whether you call him Prime Minister, you call him President, we want one center of accountability. And we are coming from a very distinct history where we knew that we were having conflict in the power sharing government. A lot of confusion in terms of mandates and in the pecking order. So proposals came, and I remember some said 28 regions, others said, but Nakuru and Laikipia were big issues. And finally, we decided to agree on what the British had left behind, which were the districts, we turned them into counties, and then we recognized Nairobi. That was the most innovative part. Nairobi as a county, and recognized Sabatia, Sabatia and Makueni, and a few others that had been upgraded, I think, by 1974 as additional county, 1992 as county. So Makueni, Mwenge would have wanted to be a county by itself because it's large enough and could have been one. But in Meru, Tharaka-Nithi had been. So the point is, understand the counties were a product of very bitter and contested history. And with their coming, they did something to us. They ended the rankles around Majimbo and the ethnicization of our politics that went around Majimbo. But in terms of development, the counties were not supposed to be receiving money. So there is a problem that's going on along here. They were supposed to be the one taking money upwards because they have the resources. They have the land, they have the house and everything. So they want to be the basis of our economic development. I hope in the future we'll be able to flip the point and the counties become the foundation of our development rather than what we're now seeing happening.
Okay, yeah.
Using resources to improve on our economy. Thank you.
Let me bring this session to an end by thanking my panel and Professor Nyong'o, but say the following. As far as leadership is concerned, and this is winding up, ladies and gentlemen, leadership is very important, but also equally important the ideas and the intellectual depth that comes with those ideas. The world could do with a Mwai Kibaki. Kenya could do with a Mwai Kibaki. Last night, for the first time, we got the news that US Treasury bills are being dislodged into the market at a discount for the first time ever in the last 80 years. US 10-year Treasury bills had a yield of 4.9% 2 days ago and going up. It's come down somewhere, and this is the reason why Trump backed up a little bit on these tariffs. This affects us, ladies and gentlemen. We are borrowers in the international money market, and that route is now forever closed for us. What do we do? As it is today, both the United States and Russia can decide, regardless of international law, that Russia is entitled to Crimea, which was occupied in 2014, perhaps half, perhaps all of Ukraine, and who knows what else. And that one country is talking about taking over Greenland. It's not a joke. And Canada is a 51st state, and they have the power to do it. I ask African countries, if this is the way things are going to go at the political level, what is going to stop some God knows who from moving into our territory and saying, well, I love this place, it's mine? Look at what is happening in the South China Sea on boundaries, and you realize we're in a very testy situation. I miss the logic and advice of Mwai Kibaki in moments like this. He would have looked at the trend in the international financial markets, which Trump did not anticipate, whose roots we don't even know exactly what it could be China and other kind of divesting from TBs, but they only hold 30% of the stuff, so we don't know what's going on. But to look at these difficult issues with sincere depth and honesty, and it is not going to be easy in the system in which we have now. I'm happy that the family of the President Mwai Kibaki has enabled us to come and celebrate this morning with him. He belonged to you in the first place, but he belonged to the world. President Kibaki was mentioned by the Time magazine as one of the most promising leaders as early as the 1970s. In the 1980s, when he was in difficulties here politically, and we know now from the archives, McNamara, who was president of the World Bank, former defense secretary, asked him to come over to Washington and be a vice president of the World Bank. He said no. To his credit, Kenya mattered to him more than being in that position. And McNamara had a good reason to invite him. The only finance minister who really put him to task, and in the terms that the World Bank was negotiating to Africa in the 80s, was President Mwai Kibaki. Without boasting, without knowing, with calmness and humility. God bless his soul. God bless Kenya.
Wow. A big round of applause for the panelists. Professor Kagwanja at the end, thank you so much. Professor Kivuda Kibwana, Dr. MUKHISA KITUHI, and Professor Michael Chenge. Asanteni sana. Let's give them a better round of applause. Asanteni sana. Now we move to the third session for this program today. And first I want to recognize, thank you, the panelists. I think you're recognizing our guests as they walk in. And that made my work a little bit easier, but just to repeat, we recognize the presence of Honorable Justice Muturi, Honorable Norman Nyaga, Honorable Jane Kihara. Tafadhali tuwapigie makofi. Honorable Gathoni wa Moshomba, Ambassador Ephraim Ngari, Dr. S.K.R. Ndegwa, Mr. Kivunga Karivi, Mr. James Mweregu, Mr. Shah, a big supporter of DP, Mr. James Kamonye. We have John Ngumi, family of Monene Cairo, Mr. Madenge Wanderi, We have Honorable Ketu Aruguru. I come from Laikipia, so I have to. We also recognize the presence of University of Nairobi students here and the student leaders, Mangu High School students, and all of you, of course, present today. Makofi jamani. It's 17 minutes past noon, and we want to stick to our program. And I'm kindly requesting Dr. Jacob Haji to come and lead us in the next session. And here, Jacob, I think, will do justice as we celebrate a special leader, an intellect, an incredible expertise in finance, and that is the legacy we're celebrating today.
Thank you, Juma. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, our program will change a little bit because our vice president, the person who works with our Mzee, a second command that time, he want to leave us, and I want to give him this opportunity to come and to talk to us. And then, since he has worked with him for that 5 years, and let us give him round of applause. We say hi to us.